welcome. On behalf of Ahmedabad Management Association, I'm delighted to welcome you this evening on a very substantial topic from an equal woman of substance today who is going to deliver it, Dr. Indira Nityanandam. This lecture that we are arranging and that you can see, it is actually Dr. Lalita Iyer's AMA 8th annual lecture. Our past president's wife, and she's no more with us now, but it's a great contribution that Dr. Iyer made on her name. And interestingly, we were just discussing this, and I think 1980s, he was one of the person who earmarked 50,000 rupees for AMA's contribution fund. 50,000 rupees. I think 80s were even a little before that. And that became one of the biggest contributions when AMA Complex came up. So these small things, these people are people who have built AMA and who have built the way AMA looks today. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And I request my colleague, Mr. Saman Ghoriawala, to come and give a bouquet of honor to our past president. When we talk about our speaker today, we all have our CV, and I was talking to her a little while ago, and I said I'm not going to read from her CV. So she's a visiting faculty to Ahmedabad, she's visiting faculty to many other institutes, including EDI, has done her PhD, has done a lot of translation work from English to Gujarati and vice versa. But she is, not many people know, probably not written on your CVs, I guess. She was an announcer on All India Radio for a very long time. And a lot of people would call her up later and say that was one of the best, and if I can quote, sensual voice that people heard. So she said my highest compliment used to be that those days. And she can speak 6 languages. Tamil, had a mother-in-law, spoke Telugu mother-in-law, studied in Calcutta, and lives in Gujarat. And she speaks all those languages and can translate from each another. So one of the work that she does, and that's not written on the CV here, is the cultural bridge of the language she brings in. And we did a series of Gandhi Katha in Gujarati in AMA, and she translated that entire Gujarati Gandhi Katha to English. So when we were talking about it, and I said, what kind of, just laughed over one of the incidents recently in boardroom. Somebody mentioned, he said, I don't speak Gujarati. I said, how long you have been here? He said, 20 years. After all these years, you don't speak Gujarati? Because the person did not know that he was speaking to a person who's a Tamilian and can translate Tamil to Gujarati and vice versa. Ma'am, we are delighted and honored to have you here. May I request my colleague, Divyesh Radia, to give her a bouquet of flowers. I'm sorry. And ma'am, we are so actually eager to listen to you on women of today, because I understand today's women go through a lot of struggles at every place, and we're really looking forward to get some tips also from you. Thank you, ma'am. The stage is all yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm privileged, honored, and happy to be here, delivering the 8th Dr. Lalita Iyer Memorial Lecture. I didn't know Dr. Lalita Iyer, but the name strikes a chord. And what a strange coincidence that my mother's name was Lalita. She passed away 40 years ago, and today I remember her as one of the women who have contributed a great deal to what I am today. The topic that I'm going to talk about today is women, the plural, E-N. Actually, when I first sent in my topic, I had said woman, a singular, because I wanted to use it in a generic sense. But then a couple of phone calls, mails with AMA, and then I decided to change it to women. And I think I'm happy I did that, Because when I'm looking at woman as generic, who do I talk about? Do I talk about Nita Ambani and Indira Nui? Or do I talk about Sushma Swaraj? Or do I talk about you and me, the middle-class, urban, educated Indian woman? Do I talk about the woman on the street who is probably breaking stones? No. So I think I'm happier talking about women of today. And what is this today that I'm talking about? Where shall I begin? What is yesterday for me? Yesterday certainly is not the grand Vedic age. It's not where the Rishi Patnis were very educated, the Anusuyas and Gargis and Maitreys. I don't want to talk about where Yatra Pujyante Nari. I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to go back to that past and where we say probably the more you beat them, the better they be. I don't want to talk about that. But I need a point where I can begin when I'm talking about today to compare it with a yesterday. And I think, very conveniently, I would like that point to be 1947, for very obvious reasons, because I have to have some point in history with which I want to compare where we are today. So where were we in 1947? If I think of it, I think we were really on a high. We were so happy. When I say we, I mean the women of India were so happy because we had got our independence, we had sort of marched shoulder to shoulder with our menfolk. If we didn't march with them, we probably kept the kitchen fires burning when they were imprisoned or when they took to the streets. We probably gave up our jewelry, our wonderful saris or whatever clothes we had. We probably did all that, and so we were very happy. And then I want to look back and I want to ask, are we better off today? Or were we better off then in 1947? There are certain areas about which there can be absolutely no doubt that we are better off today. And one point that certainly comes to my mind is the way we treated our widows then. I think that's one place where we can certainly take pride. I'm sure some of you will be saying, but in that community, you know, and you know in that state, and you know in that caste. Yes, I agree. There are areas where we are still treating them very badly. And when I say area, I mean it could be geographical areas, it could be a particular caste, whatever. But when I look at the Indian women in general, I think one fact that I'm very happy about is that we have improved. Yes, Haridwar still exists and Varanasi and Mathura, agreed, but yet. So what is it that we need to look at today? There are many, many, many areas where there are miles that we have to travel, kilometers, if you please. When I think back of my school days, and I'm talking about 40 years ago, we still had debates like topics like, should women be educated? Should women work? Should women have economic independence? I hope that those are no more topics for debates in schools and colleges. So we have come a long way, is what I would like to think. So what is it that I need to begin with when I'm talking about the women of today? I think it's the fact that we still lack self-worth. To be able to have an identity of my own because I am a woman, and not to say, oh, I'm a woman, that self-worth has to somehow be cultivated in us. And I could think of no better poet. A group of friends, we recently were talking about her, and therefore I'm going to read the last few lines from a very famous Afro-American poet who died recently, that is about a year ago. A group of friends, we read some of her poems, and we realized how much of meaning there is in that for all of us women all over the world. So it's a long poem, and therefore I'm just going to read the last few lines of that poem. And the poem is titled Phenomenal Women. I'm just reading the last verse where she says, now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say, It's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need of my care. 'Cause I'm a woman, phenomenal woman, that's me. I think if each one of us could say that, wherever we are, whichever class, whichever economic strata, whichever caste, whether we are urban or rural, whether we can say, if we could say that, I think we are moving in the right direction. So where do I begin by talking about women today? Shall I begin at birth? Because that's where the first idea of oppression, the first idea of being inferior, but then I tell myself, no, the problem actually begins 6 months before I am born. 6 months before I am born, when my mother has to go, is taken to, is forced to, I don't know which verb will really express what that woman goes through when she goes for what we love, what technology has made it possible for us to do, and that is to go for a sex determination test, amniocentesis, what follows, female feticide. I think that's where the story begins. The journey of a woman's life, even today, begins there. Well, if I don't belong to a family, then I'm such a family, then I'm born, right? So probably the problem begins there. But it's not just about being born or not being born. When I look around and I see my maid who's got 3 daughters and still is pregnant with another child, she's probably giving birth to a 4th daughter. But at least she makes sure that the sex ratio in the country doesn't get very bad. But what happens to people like you and me in Ahmedabad or in other cities or in smaller towns? We ensure that the sex ratio goes all wrong. And then what happens in society? I understand that the farmers of Haryana get their brides from Kerala. Wonderful, they have a wife. Yes, but can you imagine the plight of that poor Kerala woman, right? I'm sure she speaks no Punjabi. You might say that you can pick it up. And you might say, well, if you can speak 6 languages, why not she? You might say that. But then that is a process. When she reaches Haryana, she certainly speaks no Punjabi or Haryanvi. And then she has to get into that kind of life. So what are we doing to society? By playing with nature, by ensuring that not enough girls are born as nature intended girls to be born, we are already playing, 1, with nature. 2, we are creating all sorts of complications and problems for society. Okay, you might argue, but of course the woman should say she will not go in for amniocentesis. I think all of us know it's not so easy, because then you have other kinds of problems which are going to arise within the family. Fine. Now, there are some girls, whatever percentage, they are born. Let us look at what happens in many a family. Probably those of us who are sitting in this room are not worried about where we are going to get our next meal from. We are not worried about not having enough rotis or whatever we eat at home. And therefore, both my son and my daughter get as much food as they need, as they require, as they want. But we do have so many families, right, who decide that it is the boy who is going to earn. It is the boy who is going to support me in my old age. It is the boy who is going to light my funeral pyre and ensure that I reach there, provided I've done enough good deeds. But that's another part of the story. So if there is less food at home, well, my daughter gets less to eat and my son gets enough. We are doing that. But what about you and me? We are not worried about the food part, but I'm sure there are so many of us who are telling our son, Ravado, tare nathi karua. E to tari ben karshe, ben che na. Pani tu kem le cho, right? Ben le she, ben apshe. It is your right to expect your sister, whether she's your younger sister or your older sister, that doesn't matter. You are a boy, please sit with your legs put up and wait for your sister to get you even your simple glass of water. So that is where I think it begins. Because I'm looking at my son as the varis, right? And what is my daughter going to do after all? Paraya dhan, or whatever word we want. Unfortunately, she's not dhan even there. That's another part of the story. So what happens? The girl child begins by believing that she is inferior, that she is in some way not equal to her brother. She might do better at studies. She might be more talented. She might be more intelligent. She might have so much more of creativity in her, maybe, but that doesn't matter. You are a daughter. And therefore, whether it is her education, whether it is her choice of subject, whether it is where she wants to study, which college to go to, whether we can afford to send the daughter also, at each stage, the girl is reminded that she is different. I have no problem with difference, but it is when we begin to see her as inferior that the girl child begins to feel inferior. And therefore, the self-worth that I talked about begins to be corroded, eroded right at that stage. I've been very saddened when my third-year student in the month of February comes with a wedding invitation and tells me she's getting married. Marriage is a wonderful thing. We should all get married, I think. But when in the third year of February, with the exams coming in March, she says, I'm getting married, I say, what about your exams? E loko karva deshe to madam, hun chokkas lakish. Just look at that. She has already finished almost 3 years of her education. And the reason would be, my mother-in-law